entire personal library of approximately 7,000 volumes, books, accumulated by him from 1950 until his passing in 2018 to the Newark Public Library. The Philip Roth Personal Library furnishes a home for the books collected over a lifetime by a renowned son of Newark, who, having been presented with every major American literary award and those of France, Spain, and the United Kingdom, and having received over a dozen honorary doctorates from distinguished American universities, is acknowledged universally as among the most eminent American fiction writers of his time, the second half of the 20th century and the opening decade of the 21st. If you are ever in the New York City or greater Newark area, please consider visiting us. We'd love to see you. I had a chance to speak with Dr. Pozorski and Dr. Scheurer last week, and this Zoom webinar is actually now a meeting. After they've concluded their presentations, we will allow those of you who would like to ask questions and offer brief comments on camera. I believe the chat function is also enabled. We thank you in advance for your respectfulness, your thoughtfulness, and your observance of virtual community standards. In case you can't stay with us for the entire program, I want to announce February's Philip Roth Personal Library Book Club details. Please join us on Saturday, February 10, when we present Martina Briwa for a dialogue about The Prague Orgy, a 1985 Philip Roth novel. Dr. Briwa's research interests include literary representations of East Central Europe and the construction of selfhood and otherness in multicultural contexts. She's published articles and book chapters on Philip Roth, John Updike, and Gary Steingart. So please be on the lookout for more details soon. Again, that's Saturday, February 10th, 2024. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Dr. Aimee Pozorski has authored Roth and Trauma, The Problem of History in the Later Works, Continuum, 2011, Falling After 9/11, Crisis in American Art and Literature, Bloomsbury, 2014, and Age, Trauma, and Politics, and that was published by Lexington in 2019. She has edited or co-edited volumes on the topics of Philip Roth, American modernism, HIV/AIDS representation. With Maren Scheurer, she co-edits the peer-reviewed journal Philip Roth Studies and has co-edited the Bloomsbury Handbook to Philip Roth, which they will present today. She is professor of English at Central Connecticut State University, where she also directs the Certificate in Racial Justice. Welcome, Dr. Pozorski. Dr. Maren Scheurer is a researcher and lecturer at the Department for Comparative Literature at Goethe University, Frankfurt. She is the author of Transferences, the Aesthetics and Poetics of the Therapeutic Relationship, 2019, and co-editor of Narratives of the Therapeutic Encounter, Psychoanalysis, Talking Therapies, and Creative Practice, 2020, Amputation in Literature and Film, Artificial Limbs, Prosthetic Relations, and the Semiotics of Loss, 2021, and Entanglements, Envisioning World Literature from the Global South, and that was published in 2022. She is widely published on psychoanalysis, literature, and other media, as well as late 19th century transformations of realism. And with Aimee Pozorski, she serves as executive co-editor of Philip Roth Studies. Please join me in welcoming Aimee Pozorski and Maren Scheurer.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Dale. Thank you, everybody, for joining on this Saturday. For those of us in the U.S. on the East Coast, it is still early and gray. For those of us in Europe, it is getting late. We are thrilled to share this international event and to have the opportunity to talk about this international effort, the Bloomsbury Handbook to Philip Roth. Thank you to Rosemary Steinbaum of the Newark Public Library. Thank you to Dale E. Colston. And thank you to Beth Zach Cohen for organizing, hosting, and facilitating. Thank you to Nadine Huron for giving us the invitation to discuss this project. And thank you to Horace Nakvi at Bloomsbury, whom I think is on this morning, who challenged us to produce it. I have the sense that most of you are here today because you want to talk about Philip Roth. We are here at the invitation of the Philip Roth Personal Reading Room, after all. But before we begin to discuss Roth, I wanted to say a few words about the nature of the handbook. In academia, it is a bit like a reference guide or introduction or launching point. As you can imagine, there is no way to introduce Roth, and there is no neat way to present him to academics or even general readers. There is no one way. Roth's works are messy. I have to find a more kind of academically rigorous word than messy. They are messy, and his themes overlap in many ways. His novels resist the kind of straightforward structure that a handbook calls for. I have to admit this, something I've never before uttered out loud, something I've never even said to Horace or Maren, which is a small part of me thinks that Roth would have hated this book. And now I'm thinking, thank you to Kate for showing the cover. This is Roth with his hand out. I feel like it is, firstly, we liked the pun, the wordplay of hand and handbook. A part of me thinks it is stretched out wide to a journalist saying, stop. Another part of me thinks it is a way of saying, wait a second, I have something more to tell you. Philip Roth in his life and in his work seems distrustful of professors, people who read books like the handbook to Philip Roth, and people who create them. If you read through his novels, something that David Gublar and Maggie McKinley discuss in their chapters in this book, you see that Roth's representation of academics and professors are not always as the best humans. Roth once told me that he dropped out of the doctoral program at University of Chicago because of a Milton seminar. I think there was a little bit of ambivalence or resistance there, a defensiveness. Funny, I said to him one day, reading Milton is what made me an English major. And of course, we can see the influence of Milton in the subtitles of American Pastoral. But we also know that Mr. Roth was very interested in his legacy. He would not have donated his entire library to the Newark Public Library if he did not want people discussing his ideas and reading habits for centuries to come. And while I will return to my humble self in the next sentence or two, I also think about the work that this handbook, any single author handbook, can accomplish, which is to bring new readers to Roth or other authors, to ask new questions, to imagine new avenues for thinking about a book that maybe someone read 10 times already. I remember a warm summer night in the sunroom of one of the libraries, the Newark Library's trustees, talking about Roth's legacy and wondering if the biggest project of our careers to date, Rosemary Steinbaum's work to build the Roth Room in Newark, and my work with Maren to put together this handbook, would be lost in a cacophony of voices dismissing Roth as a misogynist, a player professionally and romantically, and a misanthrope. It was the summer after Blake Bailey's biography appeared, to both shouts and murmurs of Bailey's own misogyny and crimes against women. I think not a few of us during that riotous summer, when artists of all kinds were being reevaluated, had a brief shuddering thought that Roth would go down with his biographer. The ultimate irony, since Roth chose his biographer hoping to cement his legacy. As it happened, we needn't have worried. You are either here today or listening from far away or far into the future on YouTube, curious about what new things people are saying, not about Roth's life, but about his work. What our handbook does is show that the many, many ways we can read and value the fiction of one of the greatest American writers of the 20th century. I do not say that lightly. I am so grateful that 36 academic and some non-academic authors trusted us enough to share their work with us for this handbook at an uncertain moment during the pandemic. It was uncertain for many reasons, not least of which was the question of Roth's legacy. But I would like to think that our collaborative work over the last 3 or 4 years, I forgot to count, Maren, we should have counted the months that we worked on this, will make a small difference in the way people remember or revalue the work of Philip Roth. When Horace wrote to ask if we would be interested, I first panicked. Then second said, we can't do it without Maren. And third, I asked, what if we fail? And Horace said, you won't. It's Roth. I will turn things over to Maren, who will now talk a little bit about the structure.
Yes, thank you, Aimee. So our idea was that we would present the handbook, the contents, the ideas that went into the handbook by way of a sort of making of the thought processes that went into building this collection, the structure, and asking many of you to contribute chapters. So when we received Bloomsbury's request to submit a proposal for a handbook to Philip Roth, what became immediately clear for us is that we were in for a challenge. We were keenly aware of the fact that Maggie McKinley's excellent Philip Roth in Context was already in the making. And we had ourselves drawn so many times on so many other valuable collections and monographs that provide overviews of Roth's oeuvre. So we set out to put together a collection that would sit among these efforts, not so much as competition, even though that is, of course, exactly the mindset that a publisher will ask you to adopt in a book proposal, but as complements, in the sense that we were looking to keep open a dialogue and ask ourselves how we could ask our contributors to approach Roth in new and perhaps surprising ways. So when we finally approached our contributors, as many of you will know, we approached them with topics we thought they were uniquely qualified to tackle, but we also asked them for their own ideas. Is there something else you'd rather write about? Is there something you think we're missing? For many, this was a welcome invitation to explore subjects dear to their heart and inspiring new research, which is exactly what we had hoped for. Our goal was that the handbook would serve as an entry point for new readers of Roth, just as much as it would present new research that surprises even the seasoned Roth scholar. As a result, the final table of contents of the handbook is as much a work of collaboration as the rest of the volume. But I can say a few words on how we set up the different sections to structure the volume. In part 1, Roth through the genres, we wanted readers to develop an understanding of Roth's oeuvre as a whole. However, diachronical approaches to his work or discussing his novels by period or main character seem to us to disregard the diversity of Roth's writings across many different genres. So we gave Pia Massiero the almost impossible task of writing a comprehensive chapter on the novels, knowing, of course, that she could do it. That gave us the room to ask the remaining contributors in the section to look at other genres Roth worked with: the short story, life writing, drama, nonfiction, and editing. This helps us understand more broadly what made Roth as a writer stand out and how these different pursuits inform each other. In part 2, Roth across disciplines, we were interested in Roth's own transdisciplinary translations, as we once called the special issue of Philip Roth Studies that was our first editing job for the journal. As a writer, Roth is keenly interested in other fields and disciplines, and we wanted a section to represent that aspect of Roth's writing, his forages into the world of music, philosophy, sports, fine art, religion, and the academy. Granted, this section could also have included chapters on taxidermy, theater, therapy, and so much more. The list is endless. But this selection perhaps helps us appreciate how much Roth was thinking about art and criticism from a transdisciplinary perspective. Part 3, then, reading history through Roth, acknowledges Roth's engagement with politics and history. The readings in this section show us Roth as a writer who is interested in shifting how we look at different historical moments and political entities, using his novels as sites of experimenting with different viewpoints and new language to describe the most pressing political issues in the US and beyond. And this is perhaps one of the most interesting findings of these chapters overall, in that they are all concerned with how Roth's way with language is itself a tool of political and historical analysis. Part 4, New Directions in Roth Studies, is perhaps the section where we profited most from our position as editors of Philip Roth Studies. In the past years, we were able to see new questions emerging in Roth Studies, and Roth being questioned by emerging fields such as eco-criticism, whiteness studies, the medical humanities, or queer studies. We set up the section knowing that many other important fields such as gender studies, Jewish studies, or trauma studies have already been covered elsewhere. And we were intentionally asking our contributors to submit Roth to unexpected inquiry. What does a writer who is so immersed in urban spaces have to say about nature, for example? Or where does his obsessive preoccupation with male heterosexuality leave his queer characters? Part 5, Adaptations and Influences, was similarly created with a conscious exclusion. We decided not to look at writers that influenced Roth. This ground has been covered, but more importantly, it is still an inexhaustible source of further research that we could have only touched upon with a few select examples. Instead, what we were interested in here was how Roth influenced others, his legacy in American literature, for writers and readers in the US and abroad, for filmmakers adapting his work, and for other artists seeking inspiration in his novels. And it is thrilling to see that through looking at others, looking at Roth, all these chapters deepen our understanding of important and sometimes less well-recognized aspects of Roth's own writing. Part 6, Shop Talk, takes its inspiration from Roth's own volume and shifts our focus from literary readings of Roth to the question how other professions might approach Roth's work. Teachers, biographers, translators, and, last but not least, our hosts, the librarians at the Philip Roth Personal Library. These chapters are in part personal engagements with what it means to work with Roth's books and with Roth the man, and they are part surveys of the work that has already been done. Finally, we were very happy to include several appendices to the handbook, including an annotated bibliography of standard works in Roth studies. James Bloom and Deborah Shostak also allowed us to include inventories of uncollected short stories and film and television adaptations that they put together for their own research purposes. We hope that these tools will serve others in expanding their own research in all things Roth. And with that, I hand back over to Aimee.
Thank you, Maren. We're such good collaborators, Maren. I'm going to be so sad when this work is over. All right, so as we say in our handbook's introduction, the project begins in many ways with a knock on the door of a hotel room. And that opening already sounds like a scene from one of Roth's Capes novels. But in this case, it was perhaps the most earnest knock on the door of my career. I had just been talking with Claudia Franziska Breuweiler, a political scientist from Switzerland, who offered to keep the conversation going after the Roth at 80 birthday celebration, where many of the contributors first gathered. Claudia said, I would be interested in hosting another gathering at my institution at St. Gallen. And it occurs to me now what she was referring to was maybe I would pick up the phone or I would send her a quick email. But instead, 2 hours later, I walked up to her hotel room and I knocked on the door and said, how are we going to make this happen? Roth brings people together. So I knocked. Although we as a Roth Society and Fellowship of Roth Scholars had found many ways to connect before, Pia Masiero invited people to Italy to talk about Roth, for example. I think a few of the people on this call today attended that first gathering. More and more scholars began to circle the globe in pursuit of the next Roth discussion. Scholars from such disciplines as political science, like Claudia, creative writing, philosophy, the law, film studies, the visual arts, history, sociology, to name only a few, have initiated these conversations for decades. Our goal was to tap into these wide-ranging conversations. A similar thing could have been said for our meeting places and the countries that Roth scholars hail from. Such places as Iraq, India, Switzerland, Romania, France, Italy, the US, Canada, all scholars who approach Roth with different cultural and disciplinary backgrounds have power to raise new questions and new possibilities, new angles from which to read Roth, like looking through a prism. We wanted our handbook to embody that spirit. In this way, we wanted to think about how new pedagogies, those that, dare I say it, are grounded in psychoanalytic theory, a method, and Roth has so much Freud and other kind of psychoanalytic theory in his library that I thought that this would be kind of safe to offer. Psychoanalysis is a method of inquiry that promotes ways to keep interpretive questions open and to engage multiple points of view and possibilities. As one of our contributors said this week, and as Maren emphasized earlier, the field of Roth studies is already saturated, and we think this is a good thing. Our handbook could never have the last word, but it is one to keep the conversation going. And there is no way we could have done that without 36 contributors from around the globe, representing many different disciplines. I also think this speaks to the so-called crisis we may or may not have faced after Bailey's biography appeared, and after Ira Nadel's, and I see him on the call today, book appeared. While Bailey's biography is the quote unquote authorized and quote unquote definitive account of Roth's life and work, and Ira Nadel's is the counter life, our handbook provides 30 entirely new ways to understand Roth's life and work, with an emphasis on the work, the literature, the many ways his novels, short stories, plays, and creative nonfiction shed light on so many things about life and humanity, from the sacred to the mundane. This possibility allows us to come full circle to address the significance of the Philip Roth Personal Library at the Newark Public Library, what our handbook and the reading room have in common. Tools necessary for exploring further Roth's work and legacy, rather than arriving at a single truth or false hopes of mastering this important author. As we argue, and I hope Ira can talk a little bit about this spring issue of Philip Roth Studies, we will never know the full truth about Roth's reading life, but we know where it is housed in Newark and where we might turn to open the question to keep his legacy alive. The spring issue gets edited by Ira, who knows a thing or two about archives and life writing, features new essays that draw on the literal library of Roth archived in Newark, essays that ask questions about the relationship between what he read, underlined, annotated on the one hand, and what he wrote about on the other hand. These questions are meaningful, and I hope can serve as a guide to other author societies like ours who are tasked with upholding in academia and the culture at large the virtues of a single author in solitude, but most importantly, in conversation with others. And speaking of conversation, we would now like to open the floor to our contributors who have been invited to speak about their experiences writing their essays in their own words. And here I'll pause and say, on my way over here, I was thinking, I hope it doesn't turn out to be a kind of trauma bonding experience where you all talk about what it's like to work with Aimee and Maren. 3 drafts, editing, copy editing. We have asked them this question: how did you understand the assignment? We would love to hear how you navigated your topic, along with insights, frustrations, and highlights. Thank you, everybody. I'm not sure how it will work from here. If there is an MC, I can certainly call on people if contributors want to unmute and say a few words about their chapter and their experience.
Well, can you hear me, Aimee?
Is that Ira?
It's
Yes.
Ira.
We'll do Ira
Yes,
and then
right.
Kim Wigren next.
Okay. I have to begin with compliments to you and Maren, because I think the handbook, although I've not had a lot of time to look at every page, offers such a marvelous, diverse approach to Roth's life and, of course, to his work. And I think it's distinctive because other handbooks are much more limited in their perspective and don't have the broad kind of even theoretical approach. And I think Maren in particular has outlined the structure, which is really important. Because when I first looked at it, I thought, wow, this book is covering everything. The only thing missing perhaps is a map of Newark, but that's okay. You can put that in the supplement. And I think it's very important. And I think in terms of Roth studies, it's at a very significant stage of both summarizing what has happened over many years, but also outlines what will, we hope, come in terms of future studies. And you address that in kind of new direction. So I think it's kind of a landmark in a lot of ways for, I think, Roth studies at the moment. And you and Maren must be complimented for undertaking it, for knocking on hotel doors, which is probably a new sub-theme in Roth studies, for taking it on. But I do want to ask what you think, and I'm flipping it because you wanted people to talk about their work, but I want to ask you and Maren, what didn't you do? In other words, what's missing? Very often when a project's completed, you suddenly realize, oh my goodness, I should have added that, or maybe I have too much of the other. So I'm just curious what handbook volume 2 would include. Are there certain things that, you realize, wow, we didn't pay enough attention to, or something like that?
Can go first, I guess. The map of Newark, that's going to be keeping me awake tonight.
I didn't mean it as an omission. It was just something that would be fun.
Yeah.
Well, you could, on the website for the book, you could now include a map of Newark, which people could download.
There you go.
And insert, with their copies of the handbook.
Dale says yes to that. I will say, and this is where, we think that the conversation will be ongoing. And this is where we think the forthcoming issue of Philip Roth studies is really important. I forgot how many, hundreds of pages in the finding guide listing every single book that Roth read. 6 copies of Lolita, for example. A whole book could be written on Roth's interest in Freud or other psychoanalytic thinkers. I think that it's such an amazing gift to be able to, as we did this week. I asked Dale if she could pull Roth's copy of Eric Auerbach's Mimesis from the holdings and photocopy for us the places where he underlined in Mimesis So Maren and I work to understand the influence of Auerbach on his work. Like that is a 30-page article. I feel like we can have these conversations forever looking at his annotations in the library. And of course, I feel like one of the things I was trying to emphasize is that project was kind of growing up when our handbook was growing. So I think this is a great meeting point for kind of collaborating with the library. Maren?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, I outlined this as a conscious exclusion that we made from the handbook. All of these writers, also theorists that influenced Roth. That in itself could be another even bigger handbook. And now with the library, and also the guide to intertextual references in Philip Roth that we published a couple of issues ago, I think we now have the resources in hand, or researchers in general have the resources in hand to get into this kind of research even more deeply than we could at the moment when we were putting together the handbook. So this is definitely, I think, something that there's still so much to explore, even maybe connections that we haven't thought about yet, like this example Aimee just gave. I would have never thought of looking for Auerbach and connections to Roth if we didn't have that guide that alerted us to things that we might want to research further. And of course, some of these other I said this too, the new directions in Roth studies, there are of course other fields that we could think of. And as I said, I mean, the fields that Roth himself was interested in, we looked at a few of those, but there were so many others and so many that he researched. So there's a whole other field. And I think the library also gives good indications here where Roth's research went.
Can I just add a very quick footnote to what we're talking about, that in the forthcoming issue of Philip Roth Studies, which will focus on the library, we will be publishing the link to the finding aid. So anyone who picks up that issue will be able to locate very quickly how many copies of Lolita, for example, did Roth have, or other books by Nabokov. So I think that's going to be a very important, very useful tool. And in the ideal world, I would love to see the Newark Public Library initiate a monograph series of titles on Roth related to the works that are in the library. Maybe something to think about. Obviously, we need some funding to do it, but why not? I think it's a natural kind of progression in terms of displaying displaying the kind of research that the library will be generating.
I can think of the first book in that series. At Reading, we have the Beckett Archive, and there's been a book published on Beckett's annotations of his library. So you could actually write a book following on from the point that you made about Auerbach on all of his annotations. And that would be a way of kind of covering quite a few bases.
Love that idea. It's amazing you're thinking about Beckett, Brian. I counted, I think there are more than 10 Beckett texts. I get, maybe this is not such a surprise, in Roth's library, and he owned multiple copies of the same Beckett title. So that is really cool. I would love to see more work on Roth and Beckett. I mean, Roth and there's so many.
And what he annotated in the Beckett would be interesting. Yeah.
While you're here, do you want to talk about your experience with your chapter?
Well, first of all, following on from what Maren said, I think you suggested something, I can't remember, but we agreed on Roth and Diaspora, which I wrote on, and it turned into a very pleasurable experience because, I mean, the handbook is a strange genre. We have to admit that. That on the one hand, it's full of specialists and people really interested in Roth. On the other hand, it's written for high-level students, senior undergraduates and graduates. So it's a kind of difficult thing in a way to write for, but what I found myself doing was synthesizing and paring down and really thinking how to communicate my ideas on Roth. And from that point of view, it's been great, and I've had some really good feedback based on that clarity. So I think to bring together specialists and to which results in real clarity, I think is quite unusual, and maybe that's what the handbook is. Maybe that's what a handbook is.
That's so helpful. Neither of my parents went to college, and so I feel like in every project I ever write or like take on, it has to balance this kind of sophisticated complexity of thought. But I imagine my mom, being proud and opening the book and needing to.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think more and more in terms of non-specialist readers, which I think I think well, personally, and I think also culturally is becoming more and more important, I would say.
Jim,
I'm sorry. May I say hello?
Yes, I think so. Jim Wigren is in the queue, and then let's go back to Elena. Hi, Elena.
Okay, hi.
Congratulations to Aimee and Maren, and thank you for inviting me to participate in the project. I really did enjoy it. To directly answer your question, what really was important for me was when you said, thanks for all the overview work on what other people have done, but we really want to know what you think. And that to me was a real, not game changer, but really was like, okay, I see. You want to know what I think about Philip Roth and certain works in particular, and I thought that was really important to me. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. I know, yeah, I think Jim had the tough topic of Roth and genocide or something like that. Like that's impossible thing to write on. And Jim and we had known that a lot of people had explored the idea of Roth and the Holocaust before. So Jim went in a completely different way and talked about indigenous genocide on US lands. And that turned out to be so, obviously significant for our contemporary conversations. So we thank you. Elena, you wanted to say something also?
Just to say hello from Rome, Italy, first of all, to all of you, to my friends there. And as you know, I contributed to this wonderfully rich project, writing the essay on Roth's nonfiction, which whose subtitle is Personal Unmasking. So, as you know, of course, we all know that Roth was not only a great writer of fiction, but he played with the tension between nonfiction and fiction in his own writing, and he was also a great writer of nonfiction, and that he collected his nonfiction since he was in his early 40s. And then the last book of his was a book of nonfiction, the one where he put together all his reflections on writing with the question mark, why write? Now, I just want to share with you the emotion that was behind my choice of dealing with the issue of nonfiction in Roth, because, when I met with Roth at his New York home in December 2017, he absolutely insisted that I should have his collection, Why Write? Although I told him that I already had a copy. So he insisted that he wanted me to have the copy, his own gift of the book. And he wrote a wonderful inscription in it. And so when you, Aimee and Maren, asked me to join this collective enterprise, and I offered to write on his nonfiction. And in a way, I felt that this insistence of his, that I should have the copy that he was giving me as a gift, was an invitation that he had given me to deal with this subject and to take this task of transmission of the importance of his nonfiction, of his reflections on the issue of writing. Why write? Why did I write? Why did I write these books? And why did the writers I like write? And so I felt this when I accepted the invitation and made this choice. And I must say, in terms of his readings, there was a little table next to his armchair, which was full with books. And there were all of them books of nonfiction at that time in 2017. He was reading nonfiction. And he gave me also the book he was reading, and I could see all the annotation he had taken. And the book was The Jewish Century, by the way, at that time. He had just finished reading. So, I mean, this sense of duty I felt I had in my mind when I was writing on nonfiction and for the handbook. That's what I wanted to tell you. Okay.
Thank you so much. I know, I feel like with all the emphasis on looking at, I know this is really important, his experiences, his childhood, his love lives, his frustrations, his relationships. Sometimes I think we forget that he lived such a large part of life in his mind. He read so many, like you said, like nonfiction texts in order to kind of shed light on what he was going to write next. So yeah, I think that's such a significant contribution as well. Anybody else want to give us some insights into your process?
Well, I could speak a bit. I wanted to ask, could the moderator turn on people's video? Because I'd like to see some of the faces of the people I've missed seeing for a long time. But in any case, yeah, thank you. Hello. So I just wanted to say, first of all, I wanted to thank Aimee and Maren for producing such an amazing volume, especially while they were also editing the journal, because I know from personal experience what that takes as well. So it's really impressive. And I wanted to say that, so I ended up writing about Roth and film adaptation. And I will say that that was what I was offered. And it was the light bulb that said, oh, of course, that's perfect for me, because I'd been teaching film as well as literature for a couple of decades. But I'd looked at some random adaptations, some of which I thought were just terrible, and hadn't really pieced together the fact that it would be interesting to try to write about it. And it was an interesting problem, because there was the film art to think about, and there was my allegiance to Roth's art to think about. And yet I had been taught that when you're talking about adaptation, what's not important is the notion of fidelity so much as how the one art transposes, transgresses, whatever, the original source. And so it was an interesting problem just to think about that, and also to think about how to possibly organize something that wasn't just this and then that and then that and then that, because that's really the way the films come out if you just look at them. So it presented me some interesting intellectual problems that I hadn't encountered before, but that was really fun to try to sort out. So that's my story of thinking about it. And I discovered some things that I hadn't thought. For example, I'd really enjoyed the the adaptation of The Plot Against America that probably just about everybody saw. But what I thought about was that the things they did differently really enhanced the novel in some ways for me in a way that I hadn't expected. And so there were things like that. And I also will say, I hated the novel, The Humbling, but I think the film of The Humbling is really pretty good. So there were some surprises along the way. So thanks. And also, it's wonderful to see some of you. It's been a long time.
I miss you, Deb, and Mike's camera is now on, Brett's camera is on, Melissa is on. I don't think I've met Melissa in person before. Hello. Oh yeah, so something that Deb said reminded me to go back to Ira's question about what did we miss. So Roth and adaptation, I would love to see something on the adaptation of Sabbath Theater for theater. That production was kind of eyebrow raising, which was, I thought, wonderful. And then Brett and I had long talked about figuring out how to work into the academic conversation references to Roth's relationship with Mrs. Maisel and how that ended up. We think, there should be a writing contest about like the conversations between Roth and Maisel, Mrs. Maisel. Thank you, Deb. Any other contributors want to contribute to the conversation? Okay, Brett will go. Thanks, Brett.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, everyone. This is such a lovely book. Congratulations to you guys. Thank you so much for putting it together and for inviting me to be part of it. You guys invited me to talk about Roth Abroad, and I really wanted to make my contribution collaborative. So large chunks of my, I'm putting it in quotation marks, essay are long quotations from people who I met sort of anecdotally. Some are students because the graduate students in comparative literature come from everywhere, all over the world. And so I asked, a student of mine who's working on a comparative project between Yiddish modernism and Japanese modernism, and is probably one of only, 3 people in the universe who speaks both Japanese and Yiddish. It's so fabulous. So I asked him, like, talk to me about Roth in Japan. And so a lot of it was really collaborative and asking people to just sort of talk about how Roth figures in the places that they're from. And so I liked that aspect of just bringing in other people's voices. So thank you for asking me to do that. And it was really lovely to be able to collaborate and ask questions and bring lots of people into the conversation. So congratulations, you guys, on this wonderful book. And I definitely think you, somebody should do something about the Mrs. Maisel. And if you haven't seen it, there's just a tiny little moment where Mrs. Maisel is going to marry Philip Roth. And she says if I can plot spoil for a minute, she says she can't do it. He doesn't make me laugh, which I think is just so great and funny. And somebody's really got to do something about that.
Fred is being very modest. She also, during a pandemic, put together a Bloomsbury Handbook to, is it global literature?
Critical memory studies.
So sorry, critical memory studies. So read her book next. Other thoughts? Go ahead. Yes.
I feel being based in London and seeing Roth in London and seeing friends who used to see her regularly, that Roth in London, I always wave that flag. So I feel, and obviously that was his way of getting to Prague in particular and to other parts of the European continent quite quickly. So I'm waving the British flag.
There are some, I think it's Pinter's letters, which are at the British Library in the archives. he has some letters from Roth. It's around the time he's trying to like stage a production. I forgot about it. He calls it the torture play, and I forgot the title of it now. And all of his London literary intellectual friends are saying, it's brilliant, stage it now, stage it now. And Roth is saying, whoa, slow down a little. You are better than that. I would not put this in production yet. And he gives like 2 pages of critical notes, which I always thought was like really brave. And also like Pinter didn't care. He like put that up immediately anyway. But yeah, little details like that. How do we get permissions? The Roth estate is, and the British Library is so protective. So I don't know. That's our one hurdle.
Yeah, but the letters are there, and you can certainly read Roth in the Pinter archive, read that exchange as you've done. They disagreed vehemently on Israel, but I'm not sure if that went in their letters or not.
If there aren't any other
Aimee, may I?
Oh, yes.
Tim Chris, my colleague Rosemary Steinbaum was unable to join today, and she'll be able to watch this recording. And I happen to be president of the Newark Public Library Trustees when Philip Roth first approached us. And Rosemary and I were fortunate to have a number of conversations with Mr. Roth about his hopes for his personal library. And I must say, this handbook and this discussion here and the forthcoming issue of Philip Roth Studies and such really helped to carry out what he hoped might happen, that his legacy might be as much for his life, the life of his mind, as for what he wrote. And this conversation and your plans for the future really helped to carry that out. And I'm really grateful. So thank you.
Thank you. You don't think he's looking down on us thinking, why are all these intellectuals trying to make meaning? I just wanted to write a nice sentence. Right? Thank you for that. I know we said we'd give time for other members of the Newark community, other readers of Roth, to contribute or ask questions. So all of us are here. We'd love to hear from you and answer any kind of questions as best we can. Okay, I saw a hand and then, Kate S.
Hi, how are you? First of all, thank you so very much. It's very inspiring that the research goes on. And I've seen the library and it's fantastic. The personal library, it's very, very complementary to Newark, and Newark is becoming a destination because of it. But I wanted to ask for whoever wants to answer. Every single time we have a program on Roth, I would ask, why no Nobel Prize? What do you think? And some people came up with very interesting answers. So thank you very much. So why no Nobel?
Does anyone want to take that on? Go first. Oh, Jim has something. Hi, Jim Bloom.
Yeah, well, I talked about this last March. So, and one reason was that in 2016, Bob Dylan won, and Roth's turn didn't come up in his lifetime for there to be another Jewish American man to win the Nobel Prize. That's my not cynical answer, but world-wise, I hope, answer. If you just look at the kind of demographic distribution, that seems that rightly so, perhaps, that the Nobel Committee tries to adhere to. And I have another theory. It's in the Professor of Desire, you remember that I think it's David Kebish shacks up with two Swedish girls in a hotel room and has a kind of mini orgy. So maybe they thought that was a slur on Scandinavian womanhood. But that's a more conjectural explanation.
If I could jump in for 1 second, there was a counter Nobel Prize event held the very day a particular Nobel Prize was granted. And this counter event was sponsored by, if I remember correctly, the Jewish Community Center in Stockholm. And a whole group from New York attended. They went, and there was a ceremony, but it was in the tradition of a counter life, a counter ceremony to recognize Roth. And also in my account of Roth, I think in the introduction, I talk about Roth in New York looking at a statue near the Museum of Natural History, which lists Americans who did win a Nobel Prize, and a woman comes up to him and says, "You're kind of looking with a lot of envy, aren't you? You'll never get it. Don't you worry." And then just walked away. I'm sure she didn't even know who he was. So there's a kind of peculiar narrative about Roth's general relationship with the Nobel Prize. But I think Jim is partly right in terms of why he didn't receive it. And with a lot of these awards, I'm afraid to say it's timing. And if they had recently chosen Dylan, they're not going to turn around disregarding any of the issues with Roth's personal life and certainly what he wrote about to grant him that award.
Yeah, I mean, one question would be, you remember Bob Dylan sent Patti Smith to accept the award on his behalf. And she sang "A Hard Rain Is Gonna Fall." So I'm wondering which performer Roth would have sent as his surrogate and what song he would have asked her or him to sing. So,
and there's again a great counter tradition of phenomenal writers who never received the Nobel Prize for literature, and Roth enters into that kind of pantheon, if you will. Tolstoy, I think, is one of those figures. Yeah,
I always look.
So that's that's the next topic. Those who didn't get it.
Just to follow up a bit, I always thought there were basically two reasons. One, that he wanted it too much and everybody knew it. And two, all of the allegations of misogyny. And my guess is that the judges didn't want to have to encounter the backlash in relation to that, regardless of what anybody really, what anybody thought.
Mm-hmm. Receiving the International Booker Award, I think, created that kind of backlash, if everyone remembers that incident.
I think those need to be our last words. We're slated until 11 a.m. We've asked our contributors to give us an hour of their time, and I thank you so much. Thank you to Maren. Thank you to everybody who contributed. Thank you to members of the community and Roth readers who logged on this morning. I guess I will turn things over to Dale.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much to everyone who participated here and everyone who will view this at a later date. This has been recorded and we will share this on the Newark Public Library's YouTube page soon. So we thank you for your continued support of the Newark Public Library and especially the Philip Roth Personal Library. Aimee or Maren, do you have any closing remarks?
I just want to thank everyone for being here, all of our contributors for being with us in these past years, working with us, sharing with us their brilliant ideas and, allowing us into their writing lives. It has been a tremendous experience and it really, I think we said this in in our acknowledgements that for both of us, it was such an so many things happened in both our lives. I mean, in my own life, I became a mother at the same time that I was editing this book. And so in a way, you know, you all were a part of this as well. And so I think this will be one of the most memorable books that I have ever put together. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, if you are, oh, Deborah, you have something, or I see.
No, I was just applauding.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Again, if you are ever in the greater New York City, Newark area, please stop by. Please check the website. Follow us on social media. We'd love to have you and show you around. Again, please join us if you can. Saturday, February 10th, when we present Martina Briwa for a dialogue about the Prague Orgy, 1985 Philip Roth novel. Thank you so much to my colleague, Beth Zach Cohen, who is brilliant, who's behind the scenes handling our tech support. Thank you, Beth. On behalf of our director, Christian Zabriskie, and Board of Trustees, President Dr. Lauren Wells, we thank you all for joining us today. And again, during this time of uncertainty, we wish for you, your family, and friends to be well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See you all.
See
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you for your support of the Philip Roth Library. Thank you, Newark Public Library. Come see us.
I've been there before. I'll be there again. Love it.
Please come back. Come back. Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you ever so. Thank you.
Bye.
Hi to Simone. Simone and I have been emailing for weeks and weeks. So good to see your face. Who's also
Thank you, Ira. It's always good to see you.
Thank you. Lots of fun, and I'll be visiting soon.
Oh, can't wait to see you. I don't know if we've met in person, but we shall. Thank you.
Indeed, we will. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to go.
We're just going to tidy up and just talk a bit. And again, thank you all.
Okay, well, thanks again. You're a wonderful host.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
we want to do as much as possible to encourage people to come, read, see, discover.
Yes,
and that's really what
absolutely.
I think the room is about.
Right, and examine the work of Philip Roth. Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
I'm going to have breakfast now.
Okay.
It's only 8 o'clock in the morning in Vancouver. Okay. See you all soon.
Okay, bye now. Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you ever so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks
This
for
was
you,
great.
Dale.
Yeah. And so we'll have the recording soon, and I'll sure send you the link in case you want to share that directly with folks. And thank you so much. I got the email with the discount. We're absolutely going to purchase a copy for this space for sure. Is there a way we can get that signed by either of you or both of you, or?
Oh, that's so sweet. How do we do that for Maren? I'll be there. I'll have to look at the Auerbach, the mimesis myself.
Yep.
So I'll come in.
Yeah. I'll show you where it was. It was, if you can see the glass.
Wow.
Yeah, it was maybe the fourth down, but I didn't have to get the big ladder. I was able to step on it with a stool. So here's, I just wanted to, that's the room. You guys, I don't know. Maren, have you ever been here?
I haven't yet.
Yeah.
No.
You'll see it in person soon. I didn't know if the estate would allow me to do this. So I'll just show this with you guys so you guys can see it. Yeah. So that's all. But because there's so many things here that can't be photographed, but I didn't want to do this while we were recording. But so thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. And this worked out wonderfully, and we appreciate Nadine's putting this together, and she was fabulous. And thank you for thanking her, and I totally forgot to thank her. So I'll catch up to her. I'll catch up to her soon. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, you
Thank
too.
you. Bye-bye.
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 Bye. Thank you, Beth.